Oh, Miss Day, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you jump.
It's okay.
Well, hey, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare.
We've made it. It's day 13.
Baby.
It is Halloween. What better way to celebrate Halloween than discussing a Halloween movie? We're here with Halloween H20. This is actually our fourth year of 13 Nights of Halloween. And the first 3 years, we didn't do a podcast about them. They just existed on our Instagram page. But this is our first year doing podcasts on them. And I'm sure if you're just catching us on Halloween Day, you missed that we based our choices on birthdays. So not necessarily the birthday itself, but the birth year. So the four of us, me, Bryce, and our wives, each picked 3 movies from the birth year, which made for some interesting choices. A lot of movies none of us had seen before.
Amen to that.
Yeah, I think I'd seen maybe 3 of the movies that were on this list before. So, and actually Halloween H20 is one of those that I have not seen.
Really?
Until this list. Yes.
Interesting.
So
okay.
I can get in it. Like I loved the first Halloween movie. Thought the second one was okay. And then I didn't really care to see the sequels. I like Season of the Witch just kind of threw me, and I wasn't going to dive back into the others. And then I heard about all the various timelines as I got older, and I just
like
didn't
3 or 4 of them, give or take.
Yeah. And I was just like, it seems too much to get into. And I didn't really get into slashers until like the last 2 years anyways. Mm-hmm. So like outside of Scream, I love Scream, and then hopped in, went to Friday the 13th after that.
For sure.
Nightmare on Elm Street. And then kind of just this year went back and watched all of the Halloween movies. And I have to say, I am still Halloween itself. The first one is one of the best slasher films of all time.
Arguably the best.
It depends on if you're going to throw Psycho in there.
Yeah. That's a tough one.
There are some who are like, well, Psycho is the father, or there are some who say, well, Peeping Tom is actually the father, which I haven't seen that one yet either. But
just because it came first, though, it doesn't mean it's official. Yeah, that's a discussion for another time.
It is.
Before we get sidetracked.
This is kind of the movie that launched that slasher craze of the 80s, though. Mm-hmm. That teenagers being picked off one by one.
Right.
And the first one is fantastic, but I'm not that big a fan of the sequels. I did go back and I watched all of them getting ready for this Halloween. And we're going to talk about one of the better ones today.
Woo, baby. Here we go. You ready?
Yeah. Do you want to break this one down, or should I?
Sure, I can, because I actually have seen this movie before.
Okay.
And this was a really fun rewatch upon my second time. So
all right, I'll let you take it.
This one's it's a pretty simple premise, nothing too crazy. So this one basically is if I'm not mistaken, this is part of the official second or third timeline, I think, that they made official.
This is the third.
It's the third timeline movie of the third timeline, I think.
This is yes.
I know it's the third movie of. This is officially the 20 years after the second movie, the capper to the trilogy.
Correct. Yep.
So. Yeah, this one takes place 20 years after the second movie, because it's always been official that the first 2 were the official 2, like the first and the sequel, before we had the requel from 2018, I think it was.
Yes.
So this is the capper to that trilogy. This one takes place 20 years after the events of the sequel. At this point, Laurie has had a son, and he's in college.
Yes.
Yes, college. Okay.
Well, it's questionable.
It's questionable because it's just private school. It just says it's private school, so it could be high school. Actually, no, it is high school still because he's 17 in the movie. So yeah, that's connecting some dots there.
It's
Great
a private
start.
high school.
So they are at a private high school. He is a senior this year, and Lori is actually the dean. Yeah, the dean of the school. She has taken on a different name now. She is still like in fear that Michael will come back at any point now. And he does, obviously, and they come to their final clash as the capper to this trilogy in this timeline. So it's a pretty straightforward premise, as all Halloween movies tend to be. Nothing too crazy. But yeah, she has a son in this one. So shall we begin?
Yeah. So I can go ahead and I'll
open us up, please.
Yep. I give this a 3.
Okay.
As far as story goes, story plot. I had some issues with the setup overall. So in this timeline, the last time we saw her was Halloween night, 1978.
Right.
And we jump forward and she's apparently just been living in fear for 20 years. And there's a lot of empty time that doesn't really get covered other than a brief conversation with her son in the kitchen, which was kind of cringe and expected for the time that this movie came out. There was just some strange setup, like where has he been for 20 years? Did they cover that and I missed it?
Well, I'll get into it I'll get into it a little bit.
Wait,
mine,
she mentions that she had changed her name and moved across the country.
Right. Yeah. So there is a reason.
We're supposed to believe that it took him 20 years to figure that out.
You know what, Tim? Let's let someone we know change their name and just disappear out of nowhere, and let's see how long it takes us to find them.
That's fair. That's fair. It just seemed like these were some of the,
so harsh, Tim. My goodness.
These were some of the things that I was like, hey, once this story gets going, it's pretty solid.
Yes, exactly.
I did take away also from the story and plot. I thought the whole 20 years later was kind of clever. Like it was a good way to approach it. But I also thought the son really did not serve the story whatsoever. And other than to give her a reason to be at that school and to get some emotional conflict, like it didn't even turn into anything at the end. He just kind of vanishes, but we'll get to those later. So there were reasons why I took it down to 3. I thought it was a good story, a good plot for a slasher movie. It's much better than the typical kids show up at summer camp and get splashed, which I love. Yeah. But this one did elevate it a little bit from that, but still wasn't a great plot or storyline for me.
Okay, cool. So I gave this a 4 actually, and I was actually teetering on the 3 and 4 for a little bit. But this movie, I remember watching the first time I watched this movie, I was thoroughly surprised with how much I did enjoy the movie, and I kind of felt weird about it because I was like, it's a cheesy 1998 movie. It's got the weird cover that the 90s definitely had with their movies, and it's a third movie in this franchise that kind of lost its touch after the very first movie released. Didn't really expect much of it, but I was thoroughly surprised with how much I actually enjoyed the story of this movie. First of all, story-wise, I like the location setting. I like how it kind of changes it up from the small town and goes to a college instead. I don't know. It was a nice
California.
Yeah, in California. Yep. I really liked we'll get into it later with some of the editing and even the direction, but I do like the setting overall for a college instead of a small town. I thought that was a nice fresh, it was a freshness in the Halloween genre. And by Halloween, I mean the movies. Yeah, this story to me just came off very personal for Lori and Michael. Like it just feels like a very personal story between the two. And obviously based on the other ending movies in these different timelines we have, this is definitely the strongest ending, I think, of all of them.
I think it's interesting that you say that, because I was going to make that point at the end.
Yes, which we still can. But just to tie it into my reasons as to why I gave it a 4, I thought it was actually kind of a very nice. There was some good foreshadowing at the beginning with the she was in the middle of a class, which is interesting because she's a dean, so I don't know why she's teaching a class. Maybe they're short staffed. Who knows? But
see, story plot problem right there.
Well, anyway, they're going over a story. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, but it was making some nice foreshadowing, basically to how she eventually would have to face her demons, with specifically Michael, and how that chapter of her life will have to eventually come to a close. She'll have to face it, because the whole point of this movie is that for 20 years she's been running away from it, fearing that one day he'd come back. And how eventually this stuff has to be laid to rest, which I think that they meant it metaphorically and also literally, because this is the ending to that story. So I thought the story surprised me. I like the undertones of that foreshadowing with how they tied that story into the main story. I liked kind of seeing a little bit behind Laurie's her PTSD with like the events of the first 2 movies and how it's affected her. Like, there was one part towards the end of the movie where she's talking with her boyfriend. Oh yeah, why does she still fear after 20 years? Don't you think he'd be around? Like kind of what you said, like it's been 20 years. Like why is it taking so long? Or like, why are you still worried about it? And like she made the point of, I think it was from the second movie, like he just pops out of nowhere. Like you never really know when he's going to show up. And they also tie that into why he showed up specifically when he does in this one, based off the first movie. I just found the story a lot more compelling than I expected it to be, especially for a slasher movie. I like the personal conflict between Laurie and Michael in this one, and how they kind of tie that together in a nice bow, making it easily the best ending for any of these Halloween timelines, which means you can probably argue that this is the strongest timeline of all of them. But however, if we're going to cut it off with the other timeline at just the Halloween requel of 2018, making that the official ending, that's a close second. So, I give it a 4. I think it's pretty solid for what it is.
Yeah. So I think it's the thing that kills me about this particular timeline is that they destroyed it with the next movie. So we can, I mean, just like you said, with 20.
The next movie. Oh, are you talking about the new ones?
No. So this was followed up by this would be the 4th movie in this timeline. So this one follows Halloween 2, and then Halloween H20, which is followed by Halloween Resurrections.
I didn't know Resurrections would. Yeah. Oh, I guess, yeah, technically. Oh, man.
So I jumped in. Technically, but let's forget about that movie.
Right, because no one thinks about that movie in this timeline.
It's terrible. It started off like,
I was on a riff there, and then you just called me out on that one.
Because I totally agree with you. I was watching this going, wow, this was way more satisfying than Halloween Ends.
Yeah.
This was way more satisfying. And it felt like, other than putting Michael in the meat grinder or in the car crusher thing, I was like, yeah, this was a satisfying ending. But then they had to go to Halloween Resurrections, and they revealed that Michael had switched his mask with a paramedic that had showed up to the school, and Laurie had actually murdered a paramedic.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, that just ruins everything. So if you leave that out, this movie is a fantastic ending. This is the best ending for Halloween that we have.
I know. I felt so good until you said something now.
No,
dang it.
But I watched this one and I was like, this was so good. How do they have a sequel? And it's Laurie Strode. So I went and I watched that one and I was like, wow, that was garbage. Because they kill Laurie in the first 20 minutes.
Yep. Exactly.
And then it's a kind of pass the torch movie to the next generation, which was full of despicable humans. And Tyra Banks. She's not the despicable human, but it's anyways.
Different. Anyway, let's keep going.
Speaking of despicable humans, let's go into character. All right.
Sweet. Go ahead.
I gave it a 3. Lori is fantastic.
As always.
I like her boyfriend actually quite a bit. I loved the security guard. Was that LL Cool J?
It was LL. I was going to make a comment about him, but I'll let you go first.
He was great. Other than that, the rest of this movie is entirely forgettable side characters that are meant to be there to die.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Although I should mention, I do believe there is an old lady in here that is.
I wanted to know who she was too, and I didn't take the time to look her up.
Why? I believe
it's spacing out.
Oh no, I know who it is. I didn't
look up who it was.
I just want to be 100% correct. Yes, it is Janet Leigh.
Yeah, Janet Leigh,
who was in Psycho.
That's what I thought. Okay, that's who I thought it was. I was like, that's the Psycho girl.
Plot twist: if you don't know this, that's also Jamie Lee Curtis's mother.
That's right. That's it.
In real life. Mm-hmm. Yep. So classic. She starred in the original slasher to some, and then then her daughter starred in Halloween 20 years later. Right. And now 40 years later, there's a lot of, in that little moment, there's a lot of hints, like the license plate has initials on it that are a reference to Psycho. Yeah. The Psycho theme plays ever so briefly during a specific scene.
I thought I caught that.
Yep. That is one of my favorite scenes because Psycho is one of my favorite movies. That's really cool connection that they put in that film. Mm-hmm. I also thought it was really cool to see the mother-daughter dynamic, even though they aren't playing mother-daughter, seeing the two original like slasher girls, mm-hmm. even though Janet Leigh was murdered in her movie.
The Scream Queens, period. Yes.
Yep. So having a conversation, I thought that was cool. Outside of that, the teenagers, especially Laurie's son, utterly forgettable. They existed to be murdered, and some of those kills were pretty good. But other than that, kills. Yeah. Other than that, the fact that most of the side cast wasn't worth paying attention to. Yeah. Is what brought the score down for me. I gave it a 3 because of those LL Cool J's character, Jamie Lee Curtis as always, and then the boyfriend. I don't even know who that was, but those 3 characters were good to watch, and Michael's always fun to watch, but
always, yeah. So yeah, I line up with you a lot on that one. I gave it a 3 as well. I always love seeing Jamie Lee Curtis in this role. For the most part, she kills it. Outside from some, you're welcome. She always kills it. Given good scripts more often than not. I want to give a little bit more credit to her son John, played by Josh Hartnett. Yeah, Hartnett. While he is a side character that is more or less forgettable, he has some pretty good. He has a couple of good lines in here that kind of forward her character arc. They have some good interactions at the beginning that kind of set the stage for the arc of her character as we head into towards the end of the movie. So I want to give a little bit of credit there, but that's more of a writing thing, you could argue. But I thought he did a good job with it. But again, I don't think he's anything to write off on necessarily. Adam Arkin as the boyfriend. I liked him too.
That's who it was. Very
charismatic guy. Again, nothing crazy about his performance. He was just a nice little touch. Had a couple funny lines, especially in the beginning of the movie.
Oh, he was so funny. He
was funny. I liked him.
It was appropriate comic relief for the film. Yep.
Exactly. Also, I gotta shout out LL Cool J, man. I loved him in this movie, and I ate up his performance and his character. It was awesome. Also, little shout out to Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who I forgot was in this movie. Yes.
Baby Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
He was a baby. Yeah, for sure. The main characters are easily Laurie and Michael in this movie. There is not another character you have to worry about. The conflict and resolution all comes from those two alone and no one else. And it's awesome, but it's nothing that I think is new or really stands out in the grand scheme of things. And I think I mean, again, it is a slasher movie, so you're not really expecting a character piece. And I think it'd be kind of weird, honestly, if it was anything more than that. Because I think this is one of those movies where it's a great example of, man, we really need more movies with bad guys who are just pure evil. Which it kind of touches on a little bit at the end. I kind of like how they kind of use that towards the end of the movie a little bit. But yeah, I like the nice classic storylines where the characters of good and evil just battle it out. Like, I miss those movies a lot. So while it's a 3, it is a commendable 3. It serves its purpose, and I think the characters all do a swell job.
All right. Music and sound. I gave this a 3 because while the Halloween theme is iconic,
totally,
the rest of this music kind of just fit the scene that it was in. We got the little Psycho reference, which was fun, but the rest of it's not super memorable. I don't think it really added anything to the Halloween theme, but it also didn't take away. So it sits at a solid. The music's good.
Yeah,
for me.
Okay, so wait, you do that sometimes where you're like, pause, and I can't tell if you're going to finish your sentence or if you're
about
thinking.
To go, and then I was like, let's just pass this.
Yeah. Oh, cracks me up. Yeah, I agree totally with you. I also gave it a 3. Again, probably the most iconic horror song ever written in the Halloween music, but the Halloween theme, but. Yeah, the music for the most part just kind of fits the scene it's in. The iconic piano has its moments, but with a little twist. So I don't think it did anything crazy, but it fit what you were going for. So you know what? Good for you. 3 out of 5.
Yeah. All right. Editing and special effects. This is where I jump it up a little bit. This got a 4 for me. The kills were really solid in this movie.
Yes, they were.
The dumbwaiter chase scene, when that girl's leg gets smashed in the dumbwaiter.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I almost passed out. And I watch a lot of slasher movies, and that one just looked that hurt me. That was rough. That was some great practical effects used on that.
It was,
Also, the editing, it avoids the late 90s, early 2000s loved this like gray, overly dark horror movie aesthetic that is not fun to look at. It doesn't creep me out. It doesn't make your movie better. I actually have gone far the opposite and prefer it when you acknowledge that the sun exists in a horror movie.
Yeah.
This movie avoided 90% of the cliches of horror at the time. This movie easily stands out as one of the better edited and produced and just entirely put together, one of the better horror movies of the late 90s and early 2000s.
Right. Yeah.
It immediately is better than its sequel.
I think no one disagrees there with that one.
Which leaned so far into all of the tropes.
I totally agree with you. I also gave it a 4 out of 5. I just want to point it out, since you didn't, that it has one of my absolute favorites, like framed horror movie shots of all time, where with the door closing and she looks through like the circled window and sees Michael's face. That is one of my absolute favorite I don't want to say sequences, because like it's a very short like period where she just closes the door, it locks, and she looks up and sees Michael. And like that is one of the best shots of a horror movie I've ever seen. It's just a personal favorite for me. I don't know how anyone else feels.
No, it's a strong shot.
I feel like when it comes to specifically even the Halloween movies, I would dare argue that is probably the most iconic shot in Halloween movies.
Yeah, it's up there for sure. other than like, I usually think of the shot of her walking home from school with the books in her hand, and you see him
and you see Michael by the hedge. Yeah, that's another good one for sure.
That's about the only other one that's super iconic though that immediately comes to mind. So I think you're totally justified in that statement.
Yeah, she does such a great job with that sequence. Just the fear and the dread on her face, knowing that all of her fears have finally come to fruition with that sequence. It's just great. Anyway, I'll move off that. Outside of that, I agree. The editing and the special effects for the kills and some of the shots that they do really set the mood and set the tension for a great slasher flick through and through. Like you said, I like how it kind of goes against some of those slasher tendencies and changes it up a little bit. Also, there's this great shot of where I pointed out, Megan made a comment about it too, which was funny, but this shot where he like drops down from the ceiling, and it's just kind of like, that was another favorite moment for me in this movie. Also,
is this the first time he did that?
That I can think of, yes. At the time, yes. I'm pretty confident that was
the one-handed like slow drop from the ceiling.
Yes, exactly.
Because he does it again in the sequel, and I'm just like, man, this guy has a massive strength.
Yeah,
I mean, we already knew that to lift somebody with one hand, but anyways,
right. That was another favorite moment for me as well. The sequence of her crawling through the tables and him just flipping them, another great part as well. I thought the editing was really well done. They definitely did some great job with location and just lighting. It all set the tone really well. Put you on the edge of your seat when it came to Michael being around any corner of that college. And the special effects were really well done for the kills. It wasn't too grotesque, but it definitely set the mood of the stakes are high. Like Michael ain't messing around. So 4 out of 5. I thought it was really well done. I really enjoyed it.
All right. On to script. I bring it back down to a 3. It has its moments. It has really strong moments. And most of those moments are addressing the dynamic between Laurie and Michael. Most of the script involving the teenagers is utterly forgettable. LL Cool J's script is solid gold. Talking into a phone the entire time, and he sells it so well. But it's just, it's good. It's good. It has great scenes, but then it also has some scenes that were just pretty cringy, and that brings that down to just good across the board.
Yeah, I also gave it a 3 out of 5. It's your typical slasher horror movie script. There's nothing crazy about it. I think a lot more of the good parts of the script can go more to the direction with the overall story, like we've talked about, just that dynamic between Laurie and Michael. I think I give a little bit more credit to the direction of the story than I do the actual script itself. But for those moments when you do have those good script moments, it does hit, and it is it is a nice little moment that you get to share with the characters there. But it's your classic slasher movie, so you're not there for a great script, you're there to watch people be slashed and murdered. So 3 out of 5.
Amen to that. All right, here we go on the acting, which we've kind of touched on a little bit already.
A little bit.
Acting, there's some big names in this film.
Totally.
So we mentioned we have baby Joseph Gordon-Levitt. We have near her deathbed Janet Leigh. Literally, I think she died five years after this. Josh Hartnett, Jamie Lee Curtis. And then we forgot to mention and have not mentioned that we have young Michelle Williams as well. Who like, it's too bad that her character was so utterly forgettable, because she does a nice job, but her character was annoying, obnoxious. I didn't care for the character. Honestly, I struggled with Josh Hartnett. He was not good. I did not think he was good in this movie. I know. I just didn't really care for it. And Jamie Lee Curtis is great as always. This movie has a really, really solid cast. LL Cool J actually was great. I loved him in this movie. Adam Arkin did an excellent job as the boyfriend. He probably gets some of the best like emotional reactions in this outside of Jamie.
Yeah.
It also goes back to one of my problems with the movie, which was I mentioned the son had almost no purpose towards the end. Is that we set up this family dynamic between her and the son, and then we leave it. And it doesn't have any effect on the outcome of the movie, which I wish it could have had some nice stuff. Anyways, but yeah, it's a pretty star-studded cast, but some of those performances are forgettable. Some of them are quite good. So it was a 3 for me on the acting.
Gotcha. Yeah, I also gave it a 3. I also gave it a 3 on the acting. Like you said, love seeing Jamie Lee Curtis reprise her role as Laurie. She kind of just owns that character. There's no one else who could play that, and no one else I would probably accept as Laurie at this point. Yeah, outside of that, I mean, you get some solid performances from a couple of other people. Like I said, can't give enough love to LL Cool J for this movie. Just absolutely loved his character. He was so likable and charismatic.
Probably one of my favorite slasher side characters ever.
Yeah, was some
just
good,
so much fun.
Just some nice little comedy relief here and there. Yeah, Adam Arkin was a surprising good character in this movie. Josh Hartnett and the rest of the teenagers is just kind of your casual 90s slasher teenage characters. I don't really know if I want to bash that or, congratulate it. Like it's a
product
role
of the time.
Exactly. Product of the time. I'm not going to really hate on it too much, but overall and all, the characters served their purpose. The actors did a fine job for what they were given. Obviously, Jamie Lee Curtis taking center stage and owning that role and doing a good job. But I also landed a 3 out of 5. Nothing bad necessarily to say about these characters. I thought they all did fine. All
right. And then we're on to direction.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to have fun with this one.
Okay.
You already mentioned some great shots in this film, but this movie was directed by Steve Miner, who is not really a household name because he mostly has done TV shows and 80s horror movies. Yep. So this one was actually quite a bit late in his, I don't know if late in his career, because he's still directing, not as much. He's mostly doing TV now. He's done some episodes of Smallville.
Once Upon a Time. Once Upon a Time.
He was doing Dawson's Creek before he did Halloween H20. Right. But where I first fell in love with Steve Miner was Friday the 13th Part 2 and Part 3.
That's right. He did those.
Which were his first 2 films. Those were the first 2 things he did. And so this was kind of like, I loved seeing where he started in 1981 and 1982 with Friday the 13th, really being inspired by Halloween, and then getting to come to a franchise like Halloween 20 years later.
Yeah.
He brought a different touch that was honestly more in line with what John Carpenter did in the original.
Yeah.
And it was really nice to see. There was his skill as a director obviously had improved over 20 years, but there was just a deftness to the way he handled the film that made it really enjoyable to watch. So I loved his directing on this. It's not an Academy Award directing. That's why I'm not giving it a 5, but it was great because of a lot of the choices that he made. We already mentioned he avoided the overly dark sets of the time period, but he also avoided some of the kitschiness of the 80s, which is where he sharpened his sharpened his skills. So it was just a well-directed movie, probably the best well-directed since John Carpenter's.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I also gave it a 4 out of 5. So I mean, I line up basically with everything that you were saying there. And just as a side note, that this movie actually, let's see, it did win Best Horror Film in 1999 at let's see, Saturn Award. Yeah, won the Saturn Award. So it was recognized for its time. So good for them. It also won in 2015 the Saturn Award for Best DVD Blu-ray Collection. So that was actually interesting. Yeah. I agree. Like I said, I was very surprised upon my first watch of this movie with the direction and how they decide to go with this movie. Like I said, this movie feels just enough. I should be careful how I say that. It goes deeper than most slasher movies will go, but not so much to compromise that it's still a slasher movie. I like the simplified conflict of good versus evil within the context of Laurie versus Michael. Like, I just liked how they kind of went just a hair deeper with it, basically just going over Laurie's past and like her PTSD 20 years later. Like, oh, why are you scared 20 years later? Don't you think he would have showed up by now? And it's like, well, yeah, because last time he just kind of showed up out of the blue for no rhyme or reason, you know? And like I said, they tie into this one, like, they tie into why he shows up now. It ties into the first movie of when he showed up then as well. But like I said, I really enjoyed the direction he took this movie. I like seeing the conflict between the two. I like how they tie in, how they foreshadow towards the end of the movie. Like, you know, this is supposed to be the final hurrah. Forget Resurrections. This is my cutoff movie for this trilogy. I like how they kind of foreshadow that towards the end, and they give us a very nice clean ending that kind of where she faces her fear, she faces her demon per se, and it wraps up really nicely, I think, into a very one of the better Halloween movies. You could argue top 5, top 3
of Halloween movies.
Yeah, just throwing it out there.
Like franchise Halloween or season Halloween?
Like all Halloween movies. Sorry,
yeah.
Literally, sorry, the literal Halloween movie brand.
Okay, so the franchise.
Yes, the franchise. Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, I would say yes. Yeah, definitely. Because 2018 is still a really solid film.
Oh, I think it's phenomenal. Yeah, I still really like 18. But
yep,
yeah.
I'm with you. It's a top, like those 4 movies. If I'm going to watch Halloween, it would be, well, I'm honestly probably not going to watch Halloween 2. I'm going to watch Halloween, this movie, or 2018 are the ones I'm going to go to.
Yep. So agreed. Totally.
All right. So that takes us to the It factor. So for the It factor on this, I gave it a 4. This was the second highest grossing Halloween movie ever.
Really?
Yes.
That surprises me.
So I honestly thought it might have been the first. I do not remember what was the first.
I can look that up.
Yeah. I want to say,
let's see. So we have, oh crap. Let's see. So we had, this one came out after The Curse of Michael Myers. So that was August 5th, 1998, and 1995 was when Michael Myers released. So there was about a 3-year gap there. Not to do some off the cuff research in the middle of our recording, but yeah, so they finished up that first timeline and then started this newer timeline here after they finished up Curse of Michael Myers. And surprisingly, it wasn't a huge gap between the two.
So I will say the one I was looking at was apparently before the new trilogy. It's now the 5th highest grossing. The new trilogy tops. The new trilogy is the 3 highest grossing, folled by the original Halloween, then this one. So, and I don't know if that is. Oh no, the not the original one. The Rob Zombie Halloween was the highest grossing.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yep.
Wow.
So
I'm surprised how that one only came like 5 years after the last one, which was Resurrection.
2007. Yeah. Yep. It was, yeah. And that's one that I didn't make it through, but I tried to watch it before.
I actually do, not to side note again, but I do actually want to go and watch those movies because
I do too.
I've heard very mixed things outside of it's the worst thing ever. So.
So, well, all of that aside, to tell you, I gave it a 4 because it did have a pretty significant impact at the box office, second highest grossing in the franchise. And that means it grossed higher than the original one. And people turned out for this. 20 years later was a big deal. Mm-hmm. And it was the first one with Jamie Lee since the sequel.
Yeah, that technically is true. Yeah.
We'd had Halloween 3, which is its own thing, then 4, 5, 6. And I think this was technically the 7th, but a bunch of movies without Jamie Lee. So people were eager to see Jamie Lee go back head to head with Michael. And this movie delivered in a fairly satisfying way. So that's a 4 on the It factor for me.
Yeah. I actually just ended up settling on a 3. While it did do good at the box office, I can tell you, because this was my movie for my birth year, after looking through the list of movies that I had to pick through for this task, there were not many great horror movies this year. So
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm going to chalk that up to it is probably the best horror movie that came out this year, in 98 specifically. And with that being said, like we said, it does stand out compared to most of the Halloween movies. But I think the gap between this one and the 2018 requel that came out, I think the gap is still big enough that it doesn't quite leave a mark like that one did, in my opinion. Like you said, financially it was successful, and so that does matter, but I don't think in the Halloween franchise it really has a huge impact. It's more of like when I first saw it, it's the comment of, oh, that was surprisingly better than I thought it was going to be. It's a good movie, but I don't think it has quite the impact that the first movie, well, clearly the first movie, duh. But I think I would still pick the 2018 movie as my official, like, the timeline I want to go down, and then cut it off there. Like, I don't want to have to go through Halloween 2 from 1981 and then get to Halloween H20, because then that would mean I have to accept Resurrection as a part of that timeline. So I think
I'm not sure you do. I think you approach it the same way you approach 2018. You
right, where I cut off everything else after that.
Everything after that we don't talk about.
We don't talk about kills or ends at all.
Like, I was hoping this movie would end in a way that you could connect it to the 2018, because then it would be real solid. But you really can't. This movie really ends unless you acknowledge Resurrections. But even then, Laurie dies. So, like, there's no way around it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So I landed at a 3 there. I can understand a little bit why you would land on a 4, but I don't think this movie has that much of an impact on the Halloween genre, both franchise wise and just Halloween wise as a whole. So yeah, that's all.
All right. So that's our final scores. And
entertainment, and then
entertainment
scores.
Value. Oh my gosh. It was a solid 7 out of 10 for me. I was pretty entertained. The beginning, I was not as entertained because some of the teenager stuff at the beginning was angsty 90s teenager. Like, even with the you had to have like the semi-goth chick, the blonde preppy chick, like
classic stereotypes.
Yes, it wasn't loving that. I still have a hard time getting into 90s horror. There are a couple of them that are okay and good. But really, 90s horror is something that, in early 2000s horror, I'm not that big a fan of. I'm loving the new wave, and I like the 80s stuff, and then that's about it. But anyways, sidetrack. That did take away some of my entertainment value. But then once that story really got going, I was pretty engrossed, and it was solidly entertaining film, far more entertaining. Like I said, I went back and I watched all the sequels, far more entertaining than any of the sequels, than 4, 5, 6, Resurrections, any of that.
Not even close.
Way more entertaining than all of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Even upon second watch, I was still thoroughly entertained with this movie. The kills were great. The story was a little deeper than you expect it to be for a slasher. I would comfortably say, like, this is a good movie to watch when you need a change of pace when it comes to Halloween, the Halloween genre. Like, I feel like you have your favorites that you have to watch every single year, but this one definitely feels like a fun one just to kind of pop in and just revisit every now and then. I think it's a good time. I think you can have a lot of fun with it. I think this is a great movie for social settings. This is like the perfect, like, turn on in the background, tune in every now and then. This isn't the first Halloween where you have to watch it because it's Halloween. This is more of like, yeah, you can, this is a more laid back Halloween slasher flick. You can have some fun with it. But yeah, I was really entertained from beginning to end for the most part. It takes a little bit to pick up, but by the end, I think you're left pretty satisfied with the slasher flick that's been presented to you. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So that takes our final scores. We are looking at, for me, 34.
And for me, 35.
1 point apart. We almost never agree that closely, which both of those scores put this movie as a solidly good movie. It's in the good range from 31 to 35. And I agree. I'm not out here saying it's great. It's great for a Halloween movie, but it's a good overall horror movie. The problem with slashers in general is I don't actually find them scary.
But are they supposed to be scary? Like, what is scary now? Because I feel like Halloween movies have kind of this is what I love most about the horror genre. That's why it's my favorite genre. There is just so much wiggle room of how much it's like changed over the years. Like, what is scary anymore for some people, and what constitutes a good, like, horror Halloween movie, you know?
Yeah. And it's interesting just to see the fluctuations over time of how horror has changed from the big slasher craze in the 80s. 90s was a little bit more
kind of like teen. It was very teen.
It was very teen focused.
Yeah.
Yes, very teen focused, which was a leftover from the 80s, but it got more experimental. It was
very experimental, a little bit more meta at times, you could say.
Yes. We can blame Scream,
which we have another one of those on our list in case you didn't know that. So go check out that one as well.
Yep. And then we actually had, being birth years in the 90s, we covered a lot of 90 movies this Halloween.
Yes, we did.
So, and some of those more enjoyable than others. Hopefully you've been with us for the full journey.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and then we've gotten into this new wave of horror, which is great in that it's kind of saying it's back to in the 80s, there were no rules, even though we see a formula that evolved over time, and you can look back and see that formula. Now we're back to this kind of no rules as in what to do. I mean, some might say Beau is Afraid had very horror movie elements to it.
Oh,
and
totally.
It absolutely did, but it wasn't a horror movie. And then things like, we have a resurgence of pretty solid slashers with the Scream franchise is back at it again. And both of those entries have been solid. When we're looking at movies like Smile, which
that movie gets better the more I sit on it.
Yes. Smile, Barbarian, where we're really kind of approaching cerebral, almost addressing with mental health in the horror world. It's a very interesting time that we're in, and I'm loving most of what we're seeing come out of the horror genre right now. So yeah, anyways, but we both put this movie as good. And for my final thoughts, I kind of gave you my final thoughts. I will say the biggest issue I have with this movie as a whole is, as clever as H2O is, it's also misleading.
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, there's actually no water in this movie.
I hate you so much for that.
Like, I know I'm probably not the first person to mention that, and I know my wife made the same joke, but it is like, is it clever or is it stupid when it doesn't have anything to do with like H2O?
I hate that you brought that up so much.
Like, I do have an issue with the title Halloween. Why can't is the full title actually Halloween 20 years later, which is fine, but the abbreviation of H2O, like, we're in California, at least have a scene on the beach and maybe do something. But anyways,
this is how he spends his final thoughts.
Yes, if this is what I have to complain about, the movie's fine.
Yeah. I don't have many more final thoughts. I pretty much scratched that itch throughout the review process. Like I said, I think it's definitely one of the better Halloween movies. Top 3, you could argue, maybe top 5. Yeah, I think this is definitely a nice change of pace when it comes to those horror movies that you probably don't watch as often as the ones you do when it comes Halloween time. So every now and then, yeah, check out H2O. I think it's a pretty fun movie and you'll have a good time with it.
Yeah. All right. I think that covers our 13 Nights of Halloween.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you for being here with us. Hopefully you were here the whole time. If not, go back. All 13 episodes should be available if you're listening to this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then let us know what you want to see next year for Halloween. So do you want to see slashers only? Do you want to see possessions only? Do you want to see a decade? What do you want? Let's get some feedback on that, because I live for 13 Nights of Halloween. I love this time of year. And I'm not just watching these 13 movies. I'm watching a horror movie every day from September 1st to Halloween.
Tim's a little how do we want to put this? He's a little out of the ordinary when it comes to. I was
deprived as a child.
He's a little out of the ordinary when it comes to the seasonal movie watching festivities that we partake in.
I actually tend to watch horror movies up until springtime.
Listen, I love a good horror movie, but like I watch a good horror movie, I will, but Halloween time comes around, like, it is full-fledged nothing but horror movies the whole month. So I'm with you on that, at least. Like, October is for that.
All right, so that gets us back to, let us know what you want to see for next season.
Yes.
Hopefully we can bring you some more guests. Hopefully we can bring you some bigger movies. I thought these movies were kind of abstract this year.
Yeah, a little bit.
Let's get back to it. Let's have a great next season 2. Thank you for joining us for this, our first podcast season of 13 Nights of Halloween.
Yep. And as always, make sure to follow us on YouTube, on Rumble, and Spotify. Share that with your friends, family, and coworkers, close ones, maybe. I don't know. You guys are close with your coworkers. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter. Outside of that, nothing else I can think of. Anything else, Tim?
Have a great time tonight. If you're listening to this early in the day, enjoy your Halloween, and don't forget to check your candy for razor blades.
Amen. See you guys later.